Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very first AML Caregiver Chapter event brought to you by the HealthTree Community for AML program. My name is Katie Braswell, and I'm the HealthTree for AML Community Director. I'm so excited to see each of you here today as we launch this brand new chapter. This chapter will meet monthly and is a space for AML caregivers to come together to learn about topics that are relevant to you and to connect with each other through shared experiences and discussion. I'm very grateful to have each of you here today for our first meeting and for your support in building this AML caregiver community. I'd like to let you know that today's session will be recorded, and the recording, along with any resources we discussed today, will be sent via email to all registrants within 48 hours after the event has concluded. I'm going to quickly walk you through some important Zoom features, just in case you are new to using the Zoom platform. If you hover over the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see a row of icons appear. To turn on your video, you will press and start the video button and press it again in order to turn your video off. We would love for you all to keep your videos on if you feel comfortable. Doing so helps to create a stronger sense of community. Each of your microphones should be muted and will be kept off by our team throughout most of the event. During the discussion time today at the end, if you would like to verbally ask a question, we will prompt you to unmute yourself at that time. Press the chat icon to open up the chat box. If you have any questions or comments for us or for our speaker throughout her presentation, please type them here. And lastly, if you would like to verbally ask a question during the discussion section, you will click on reactions and then the raise the hand option. We will review this again after Kerith's presentation. And now let's get started with today's event. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors without whom this event would not be possible: Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen, Genentech, AbbVie, and Jazz Pharmaceuticals. The topic of our event today is titled Lessons Learned as an AML Caregiver. Here's the agenda for today. I will introduce our speaker, Kerith, and she will spend the next 30 minutes giving us her presentation. After the presentation, we will open it up for your questions and comments and end the event with a few announcements on upcoming events. So let me take a second to introduce our speaker, Kerith. Kerith lives in New Orleans, Louisiana, and is a mother to a spirited 8-year-old, Adair, and 2 beloved rescues, Violet and Bubbles. She lost her best friend and husband, Rob, to AML in March of 2018. Kerith learned firsthand how overwhelming an AML diagnosis is for both the patient and caregiver, and wishes she had a resource such as HealthTree for AML during Rob's illness. She hopes that by sharing her experience, that she will be able to help patients and caregivers better navigate an AML diagnosis. I'm also really excited to announce that Kerith will be joining the HealthTree Foundation full-time in March to help us run our AML programs, so you'll be seeing a lot more of her, especially during our radio shows and our roundtable programs. We are so excited to have you here with us today, Kerith, and to have you join the HealthTree team. So with that, I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Katie. I'm so grateful to be here today, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm happy to be here to share Rob and I's story today with you. And I'll just go ahead and get started. As Katie mentioned, I'm a mother to an 8-year-old, and I lost my husband, Rob, almost 4 years ago after a battle to AML. I wish today that I had some magical words of wisdom for you or a silver bullet to offer everyone, but I don't. I don't know more than what probably most of you all know as caregivers, but I do know that if I can share my experience and help others in any way, I'd like to do that. I'd like to take Rob's experience with leukemia and use it in a positive way if I can. Rob was a healthy, active, and fit 42-year-old man. It was November 2017, and one day he complained about what he thought was a painful hemorrhoid that had been bothering him for a couple of days. And I apologize for TMI, but we're probably all used to this by now, right? I suggested he go to the doctor, something he didn't do often, and get it checked, and maybe they could prescribe some cream to help. He made an appointment and the doctor confirmed it was a hemorrhoid, but said there might also be an infection. The doctor gave him some cream, but said that if the cream didn't start to help soon, to start taking an antibiotic, and he gave him a prescription for an antibiotic as well. The pain had gotten worse and was uncomfortable for him at this point. The cream didn't help, and I suggested he take the antibiotics to see if that would help. He started having a reaction to the doxycycline antibiotic, which had happened to me once before. It was over the weekend, and so he stopped taking the antibiotic, and I told him he needed to go back to the doctor and get a new antibiotic. At this point, he started complaining of the pain being all around his groin area, and it was getting worse. He also started feeling a pain in his side as well. He went back to see the doctor and met with a nurse, and she prescribed a different antibiotic. At this point, he told the nurse the pain was going down into his legs, and he felt a pain in his side when he took a breath, and it was hard for him to take a deep breath. The nurse said she could schedule him for a CT of the abdomen, but it would take a couple of days for that. She felt around his abdomen and did not feel any abnormalities. She sent him home, but said, if at any point you have trouble breathing or a hard time catching your breath, go to the emergency room. That night, Rob was walking around sort of hunched over, and I realized just how much pain he seemed to be in. He said he was feeling pain in his feet too. He said the pain in his side was getting worse, and he felt like he couldn't get a deep, full breath. He told me what the nurse had said to him, and he said, I think I might need to go to the ER. Our 3-year-old daughter at the time was asleep, so he drove himself to the nearby hospital, which was very close, about a 5-minute drive. He was texting me when he got there, letting me know he made it, that he was getting checked in, etc. About an hour and a half later, he called me to say, they think I have a blood disorder. Then another 30 minutes or so later, he called back and said, they think I have leukemia and they are transporting me by ambulance to Yale Hospital. Rob's white blood count was over 330,000. His spleen was very enlarged and he had blood clots in his leg and his lungs. The doctors at Yale started a dose of chemo the next day in order to bring his white count down. Rob spent the next few months in and out of the hospital. He did his first official round of chemo, the 7+3 induction regimen, and then waited for his blood counts to come back up. And the plan was hopefully to proceed to a bone marrow transplant. Unfortunately, after his induction round, the blasts came back. And while we were meeting with the doctors and discussing next steps, his white blood counts were rising quickly. He was admitted to the hospital to take an oral chemo drug to bring his white counts back down. And a day before he was supposed to come home, on a Sunday, he experienced an intracranial hemorrhage, a brain bleed, while still in the hospital. After 2 days in the neuro ICU, he needed to be intubated and his brain was dying. He was being kept alive by a ventilator. We made the difficult decision to take him off the ventilator on Thursday, March 18th, 2018. Receiving an AML diagnosis is a shocking and traumatic experience. While you and your loved one are just beginning to process the information and the diagnosis, you have an overwhelming amount of information being thrown at you, and you often have to make treatment decisions quickly. While there is no roadmap for these situations, having someone to talk to who has walked that road before you can certainly help. There's so much that I have learned in those 4 short months that Rob was sick, and of course, since then. Here are 8 lessons that I learned through my husband's AML diagnosis. Number 1 is to seek out a specialist immediately. Rob and I were lucky. The ER that he went to automatically sent him to Yale Hospital in Connecticut, and a specialist was assigned to his case. If you are not at a hospital where they have an AML specialist, find one that does as quickly as possible. We were within driving distance of major cancer centers and hospitals, so we had options. We quickly realized how lucky we were, as the first week was very scary. Rob could have had a lot of complications and perhaps even died that first week with his white count as high as it was. So we were lucky to have a very knowledgeable team to get him out of danger. If I had known about a resource such as HealthTree when Rob was first diagnosed, I would have been on it at all hours of the day, looking up information, watching videos, and educating myself as much as possible. Using the HealthTree site to find a specialist is such a valuable tool. The other tool on HealthTree that I think is very valuable is the clinical trial finder. You can research trials on your own, but you should also ask your AML doctor if there are any clinical trials that your loved one might qualify for. Number 2, get a second opinion. I think equally as important as finding a specialist is getting a second opinion. People often feel like this is too overwhelming and time-consuming to do and prefer to just find a doctor, and if they like the doctor, just go with that. But even if you like that doctor and they're a great doctor, it is still a good idea to get a second opinion. Second opinions can often confirm that the treatment your loved one is receiving is in fact the same treatment that another specialist would recommend, which allows for more trust and confidence in the process. A second opinion can be different, and in that case is worth looking at and doing research and understanding why the doctor is recommending something different and what the reasons are behind their treatment choice. A second opinion can be as easy as sending records to a doctor and asking the doctor to review the records and asking if they agree with the current treatment recommendation. It doesn't necessarily have to mean another visit to another doctor for your loved one. Number 3, knowledge is power. While the doctors are the experts, educate yourself as much as possible about the disease and treatment so you can advocate for your loved one to receive the best care possible. The more I knew and understood about the disease, the more I felt like I had some control. If I couldn't take part in the conversations and the decisions that needed to be made, I didn't feel like I was taking an active part in my husband's care. And in order to do that, I needed to learn as much as possible about the disease. This shouldn't feel like you're cramming for a test or to put pressure on yourself, but to create a sense of empowerment for you and your loved one. Again, this is why having a resource such as HealthTree would have been so valuable to me at the time. Knowing where you can go to find information that you can trust is a very important part. I remember asking the doctor where I could go online to learn about Rob's leukemia, and I was directed to go to UpToDate, which I actually think is named something different now. But you have to pay for a subscription to it. So I think I paid for a week and just tried to do as much research as I could. And it's actually not a cheap subscription, so I didn't continue doing that. Number 4, write your questions down. Get a spiral notebook or journal of your choice that is just for daily notes, thoughts, and questions. It helps to take note of any new or different side effects or symptoms and when they started, as the doctors will ask you those questions. Keep a running list of questions as they come up and prioritize the top 3 or 4 that you want answered when the doctor makes his rounds. It helped me to write the answers down and check them off as I got the answers, just because sometimes it is information overload and easy to forget some of the information. So writing it down was helpful to me. Even though sometimes you might feel like you have limited time with the doctor, you have the right to ask the questions and as many as you want, and you have the right to get the answers. But I found I preferred to try to find what answers I could find on my own and save the ones I couldn't find to ask the doctor. This is where I really felt I had to be proactive, as the doctor often only gave a limited amount of information, never more. For instance, why he or she might have chosen a particular drug over another. And those are the questions that I wanted answers to, not because I didn't trust the doctor's abilities or knowledge, but for my own education. Number 5, ask the doctors the difficult questions. I don't recommend Dr. Google because there is a lot of misinformation out there. But I had done my own research and I knew from Googling Rob's diagnosis that it wasn't a good prognosis. But I chose to believe that he was young and healthy and that he had a chance to beat the leukemia. But I look back and I wonder why the doctors were not more direct with me about how serious his cancer was. I understand the doctors want everyone to have hope and that a positive attitude is extremely important in fighting cancer. And perhaps that conversation would have happened a little later down the line if Rob hadn't died suddenly. But I wonder sometimes if the onus of delivering the bad news, aside from the diagnosis, has been taken off the doctors due to the wealth of information that is made available to patients online. Or if this has always been a problem where doctors don't always deliver the full extent of the bad news. I was just so unprepared for this to happen, even though I knew with my husband having cancer that this was a possibility. I just didn't realize it could happen so suddenly. While I don't think the doctors can tell you every possible thing that could happen or go wrong, I think if I had known that Rob was likely not going to survive this cancer, I might have been spending my time with him differently. I believe you can know your prognosis and remain positive that you can beat it. That mindset is a choice, and cancer miracles happen every day. Number 6, have the difficult conversations with your loved one. I think this is a very big regret I have. I don't like to spend a lot of time regretting because you can't change how it happened, which is why I feel strongly about sharing this part of our story with other people. Rob and I had gotten life insurance just a couple of years before he was diagnosed with cancer. I had suggested we go see a financial planner when my daughter was born so we could get guidance on how much money we needed to put in a 529 plan while contributing to a 401k plan, et cetera. The person that had been recommended to me by a woman I worked with happened to sell life insurance. His first recommendation was that we buy life insurance. Rob and I had never discussed that. Thankfully, we had life insurance when Rob passed. You would think that might have led to other conversations, such as having a will, but it didn't. We did not have a will, and I wish someone had asked about this while Rob was sick, because I am definitely a planner, and I would rather have something in place just in case the need arises. I believe this would have opened the door to other conversations such as advanced care directives, DNRs, and burial preferences. I do believe these conversations would not have been easy for Rob to have when he was sick. He was the eternal optimist, and that is such a part of why I loved him. But I would have had the conversations because they were important to have. I think it's important to know that these conversations are ones that we can and should be having with our loved ones before we are in a situation where we need to have them. But we should be having them when someone is diagnosed with cancer. As a society, we are very uncomfortable with talking about death and dying. It's almost as if we believe that having the conversation about death will make it happen. I think Rob and I could have had the conversation and then moved on back to focusing on fighting his cancer. I regret not having had these intimate conversations with Rob, the person that I had pledged my love to in sickness and in health. Number 7, research complementary physical and emotional wellness options on your own. Some hospitals have social workers that will come speak to you about different services they may offer. But I am a believer that it is very important to take care of your body and your mind. There are so many alternative healing modalities that can help with pain and stress management. I'm a big proponent of finding something that appeals to your loved one and to you and encouraging that, whether that be walking laps around the hospital floor, meditation or guided imagery, or listening to a positive, uplifting audiobook or podcast. Rob was not one for alternative therapies, but he was open to the idea of guided imagery as he could listen to it while he was falling asleep and he didn't even need to pay attention. He was also competitive, and I gave him an Apple Watch, and he liked to measure his lap mileage around the hospital. It gave him a chance to set little goals for himself. Find something that you and your loved one like to do as a form of stress release and as a form of self-care. Number 8, accept and ask for specific ways to help. During Rob's illness, it was so touching to see how much everyone wanted to help. Friends set up a meal train, which was extremely helpful. I found people often asking, what can I do to help? It would actually be more helpful if people would come to us and say, I'm dropping off dinner on Tuesday, or I'm going to come pick up your daughter on Saturday and take her to a movie. But that often doesn't happen. And to be fair, most times people don't know what we need most. Let people know specific tasks that would help you, like asking for dinner to be dropped off on a certain night, or help with having the kids picked up and taken for pizza one night, or maybe you need some staples from the grocery. Whatever it might be, people want to help, and it helps them feel useful instead of helpless. It isn't always easy to ask for and accept help, but it is a win-win for everyone. And that's all. Thank you for letting me share my experience with you today. I'm very grateful to be here, and I look forward to hearing any questions or comments.